Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. Evelyn had always known that the quiet rhythms of village life concealed secrets beyond the fields and forests of her small home. Each evening, as twilight settled over the thatched roofs and the sky blushed with the fading hues of the day, she would sit by the fire outside her modest dwelling and listen to the murmurs of the wind. In those quiet moments, a stirring deep within her heart seemed to whisper of a world brimming with ancient power, a realm where cosmic forces danced in delicate harmony with mortal souls. Yet until that fateful night, Evelyn had never understood why her dreams were so unlike those of her friends, dreams filled with flickering images of sparkling runes and radiant designs that defied explanation. On an autumn night when the stars shone with an unusual brilliance, Evelyn's sleep was pierced by a vision that would forever alter the course of her life. In the dream, she found herself standing in an endless expanse of darkness, a void that shimmered with scattered points of light like distant galaxies. Hovering before her was a swirling form, a sigil of such intricate design and luminous majesty that it seemed as if the very essence of the cosmos had been carved into its form. The sigil pulsed in time with a deep primordial beat, casting vibrant hues of cerulean and silver across the void. In that moment, Evelyn felt a force surge within her, an energy both alien and intimate that ignited a hidden well of power she had never known existed. The vision filled her with awe and trepidation in equal measure, and as she awoke with a gasp in the silent pre-dawn, the image remained seared in her mind. In the days that followed, the extraordinary visions grew more persistent, haunting vivid reveries that intruded upon her waking thoughts. She saw the sigil not only in her sleep but sometimes in a flash of sunlight through the branches, on the surface of water in the village well, and even in the patterns formed by falling leaves. The sight of the celestial symbol stirred something deep inside her. It was as if it called to her very soul, urging her to discover its hidden meaning and the purpose it bestowed upon her. Uncertain, fearful, yet undeniably drawn to this mystic force, Evelyn began to seek answers, driven by an inner longing that she could no longer ignore. One morning, as the mist clung to the dewy fields and the birds began their gentle chorus of dawn, an enigmatic figure rode into the village, clad in robes that shimmered like the night sky, and riding a majestic steed, whose gait was as graceful as a comet's arc through the heavens. The rider exuded an aura of serene authority that seemed entirely out of place among the humble cottages and earthen paths. Villagers gathered in quiet awe and whispered among themselves of omens and prophecies, but it was only Evelyn who felt an immediate and overpowering connection to the visitor. The rider dismounted in the village square, his presence commanding silence. In a measured tone that carried the echoes of distant starlight and ancient wisdom, he introduced himself as Master Calum, guardian of the Empyreal Sigil. His eyes, deep pools of knowledge and compassion, swept over the assembled crowd before settling on Evelyn. In that moment, she felt as though the very air around her vibrated with cosmic resonance, a silent recognition of a destiny long foreseen. Child of the starlit whisper, Master Calum intoned, his voice both gentle and resonant, you have been touched by the call of the cosmos. The sigil that you see is not mere illusion, but the ancient mark of the Empyreal. It is the power of our universe, the bond that once united mortal and divine. You are one of the chosen, destined to be bound to the sacred light of the celestial, and your journey begins now. The simple words sent a tremor down Evelyn's spine, flooding her with an amalgam of fear, wonder, and a powerful sense of belonging she had never before felt. Though she was young with no discernible claim to greatness, every fiber of her being quivered with the truth in his words. It was as if the quiet life of the village, the endless fields and familiar faces, was merely a prelude to something far grander, a tapestry of fate woven with threads of stardust and ancient promise. In the ensuing days, Master Calum took Evelyn under his wing, guiding her through a sacred process known as the Celestial Communion. The ancient rite was a closely guarded tradition among the sigil-bound, a select order of mystics whose destinies intertwined with the cosmic energies of the Empyreal sigils. In a secluded grove on the outskirts of the village, under a canopy of ancient oaks and beneath a sky ablaze with constellations, Calum led her in a meditative ceremony. There she was invited to open her heart and mind to the cosmic energies that pulse through the astral plane, The air shimmered with otherworldly luminescence as Calum recited incantations in a tongue older than time, a language in which each syllable carried the weight of celestial truths and divine mysteries. As the rite unfolded, Evelyn felt her body become a conduit for the cosmic energy of the sigil. Her senses were flooded with visions, a cascade of celestial images and cosmic landscapes that defied mortal imagination. She saw galaxies spiraling in the void, nebulas blooming in hues of unimaginable brilliance, and star systems entwined in a harmonious dance. Through these visions, she perceived the subtle interplay of fate and free will, the eternal bond between magic and life. For a brief transformative moment, the boundary between her mortal self and the vast infinite cosmos dissolved, and she felt at one with the heartbeat of the universe. In that transcendent experience, a fragment of the Empyreal sigil etched itself onto her soul, marking her as a sigil bound, the chosen vessel of cosmic power, and the guardian of the light of creation. The experience was overwhelming and left her trembling, yet it filled her with a profound sense of purpose. In the days that followed, her once ordinary existence in the village became a series of tentative steps toward a destiny that promised both wonder and immense responsibility. Master Calum, patient and wise, taught her the ancient lore of the Empyreal sigils, how each sigil was a repository of divine energy, a beacon of pure magic drawn from the fabric of the cosmos. Through rigorous training and persistent meditation, Evelyn slowly learned to harness even a fraction of the boundless power within her. She studied dusty tomes inscribed with celestial diagrams, practiced incantations that resonated with the hum of the universe, and practiced controlling her emotions, for she soon discovered that the power of the sigil was as volatile as the cosmic winds. A single spark of uncontrolled passion could trigger a conflagration of magic that might prove as destructive as it was magnificent. As her abilities grew, so did her questions. Who were the ancient beings that had left these sigils scattered across the void? What was their purpose, and why had they chosen to bestow such immense power upon the mortal realm? These questions became the fuel for her relentless pursuit of knowledge, a journey that led her through forgotten ruins, celestial libraries hidden within ancient monasteries, and late-night conversations under starlit skies with Master Calum. In one particularly poignant lesson, the venerable guardian recounted the legend of the Empyreal sigil, a story of creation, sacrifice, and the eternal interplay between light and darkness. According to the myth, the sigils were not simply gifts of power but were the essence of a divine covenant, a promise that mortals and the cosmos would remain inextricably linked, that the flickering light of knowledge and hope would forever shine amid the encroaching darkness of the void. Slowly, Evelyn began to understand that her journey was not just about the awakening of her own magical potential, but about a larger cosmic balance. The power of the Empyreal sigil, while a wondrous gift, was tempered by the responsibility to maintain harmony in a universe fraught with chaos. Every surge of magic that coursed through her veins was a reminder that even the greatest power demanded sacrifice and restraint. With every passing day, she grew more determined to honor that covenant, to use her newfound abilities not for dominion or personal gain, but to serve as a guardian of the cosmic light and a beacon of hope for a world that had long forgotten its connection to the divine. Yet even as her heart swelled with resolve, shadows of doubt crept in. The strange ethereal visions that haunted her nights occasionally carried darker, more foreboding images, a hint of looming threats and mysterious adversaries seeking to exploit the celestial power for their own sinister ends. In one chilling vision, she saw silhouettes of dark figures moving among shattered starfields, their eyes glinting with malice as they reached for the shimmering sigil. These specters, she sensed, were harbingers of an imbalance that could shatter the delicate equilibrium of the cosmic order. The fear that gripped her was not merely a terror of the unknown, but a visceral reminder that with great power came an equally great peril. Master Calum, ever perceptive to the shadows in her heart, reassured her in gentle tones and measured words. "Child, every great light casts a shadow, and it is only by facing those shadows that one may truly embrace the radiance of the heavens. Do not fear the darkness within your visions, for they are the echoes of the past and the warnings of a future yet unwritten." His words, filled with compassion and a deep, abiding wisdom, soothed her restless soul even as they spurred her to seek out the hidden truths behind the cosmic call. The days turned into weeks, and the once quiet rhythm of village life gave way to a new cadence, a heartbeat that resonated with the pulse of the cosmos. Evelyn's transformation did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to spread among the villagers of a strange, otherworldly light that seemed to emanate from the once unassuming girl, and of dreams that spoke of far-off stars and ancient powers. Some regarded her with reverence, while others cast wary glances, uncertain of the change that had befallen their kin. Yet amidst the mix of awe and suspicion, there emerged an undercurrent of hope, a hope that perhaps the old bonds between the mortal and the divine might be mended once more through the awakening of a true Sigil bound. One evening, as a pale crescent moon rose over the horizon and the village lay hushed under a velvet sky, Evelyn stood at the edge of a quiet field, the cool night air caressing her skin as she looked upward. The heavens, vast and enigmatic, sparkled with an innumerable array of stars, each one a silent testament to the grand tapestry of creation. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, a call to venture beyond the boundaries of her humble existence and to seek out the deeper mysteries woven into the fabric of the universe. Master Kalem's lessons echoed in her mind as she softly recited the incantations of the celestial communion, her words carrying on the wind like a pledge to the cosmos. The air shimmered around her, and the Empyreal Sigil, once a distant enigmatic vision, appeared before her eyes, a luminous pattern of radiant light, intricate and transcendent. It hovered like a beacon, inviting her to step forward and embrace the destiny that had been silently waiting for her all her life. In that sacred moment beneath the boundless sky, Evelyn Starheart felt the irrevocable bond between her mortal soul and the endless energies of the cosmos. With a determined heart and trembling resolve, she vowed to uncover the secrets of the Empyreal Sigil, to guard its light and to honor the ancient covenant that linked all beings to the wonder of creation. And so, as the night deepened and the stars bore witness to her silent oath, her journey as a Sigil bound began in earnest, a journey that would lead her to places of unimaginable beauty and peril, where the fate of the cosmos itself would someday rest upon her shoulders. In a forgotten district on the fringes of a once glorious city, where the dust of antiquity still clung to every weathered stone, Leora Moonveil moved with a measured, deliberate grace. Her exile had given her years of solitude and introspection, time to unburden herself from the constraints of an order that had rejected her rebellious thirst for knowledge. Now cloaked in a mantle of deep midnight blue and adorned with silver sigils of her own design, she sought refuge among ruined temples and crumbling observatories, a labyrinthine network of archives that recorded the secret history of cosmic magic. Her journey brought her to an ancient library, hidden behind a collapsed facade that modern eyes had forgotten. The entrance was marked with faded celestial murals and broken star maps carved into the stone, vestiges of a time when magic was interwoven with the light of distant galaxies. Inside, the air was thick with the musk of decayed parchment and the lingering echo of incantations long since silenced. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, though battered by time and neglect, still cradled countless scrolls and manuscripts that detailed the lore of the Empyreal Sigils, arcane markings bestowed by deities whose names had been lost to mortal memory. Leora's fingers trembled as she caressed the cracked leather spines of these ancient texts. With each carefully chosen scroll, she sought not only the hidden knowledge of forgotten rites, but also clues that might reveal the original purpose of the Empyreal Sigil. The writings, penned in a language that shimmered with metaphors of light and void, spoke of a cosmic covenant, a promise between the celestial and the mortal realms. They told a story of creation, of a divine spark that had ignited the heavens, and of a terrible price paid when that spark was exploited by those consumed with ambition. As she settled at a crumbling reading desk, Leora unrolled a particularly fragile manuscript. The brittle pages whispered secrets of an era when the sigils were not merely sources of raw power but living embodiments of balance, a light that was meant to guide and protect rather than dominate and destroy. Her eyes darted between intricately drawn diagrams of astral pathways and cryptic verses that foretold an imbalance. The text hinted at a dark force stirring beyond the boundaries of known realms. There were fragments that described a fallen mage, a once pure soul who had turned towards corruption, seeking to usurp the cosmic energies for his own nefarious ends. The descriptions were surreal and laden with foreboding symbolism. A man whose eyes were said to mirror the void, whose presence was accompanied by a chill that stilled the very air. Hours slipped away into days as Leora immersed herself in the ancient prophecies. In the lamplight of the underground archive, she deciphered passages that predicted a time of tumult, a moment when the very essence of magic would waver, and in its falter reveal itself susceptible to corruption. The manuscripts warned of a celestial eclipse that would dim the Empyreal Sigil's radiance, allowing a dark ambition to flourish unchallenged. Each line she read tightened a coil of dread and determination within her. This was not merely academic curiosity, it was a dire portent, a cry from the cosmos that a long-forgotten adversary might soon rise to plunge the world into a chaos that no mortal power could easily contain. Amid the cryptic lines and celestial allegories, an inscription caught her eye, a verse that invoked the ancient guardians of the sigils and spoke of an unbroken chain of destiny. It called upon those chosen by the stars to reunite under the banner of truth, to confront the shadow that sought to corrupt the divine balance. The verse suggested that only through a unity of purpose and the combined strength of the sigil bound could the coming catastrophe be averted. Leora sensed that her own destiny was inextricably linked to these revelations. Even though she had been cast out for her unconventional methods and for daring to question established dogma, the prophecies spoke of a role meant for one with a rebellious spirit and an unyielding quest for truth. Her studies continued in a state of fervent urgency. She cross-referenced her findings with other fragmented documents, records of ancient rites, letter fragments exchanged between long-departed mystics, and even celestial charts that aligned with rare astronomical events. Each piece of evidence reinforced the growing picture of an imminent threat, a force dark and insidious, whose ambitions extended beyond the mortal coil to unsettle the cosmic order itself. The texts foretold that this force was gathering strength, its tendrils reaching into the hearts of unwary men, seducing them with promises of unbridled power at the expense of the sacred balance. The warnings were stark and unambiguous, a fall from grace that threatened to plunge the realm into eternal twilight. With the urgency of her discoveries pulsing in her veins, Leora knew that she could not remain isolated within the sepulchral silence of the forgotten library. The destiny of the Empyreal Sigil, and indeed the balance of all cosmic magic, demanded that she reach out to those who possessed not only the potential to wield such power but also the wisdom to safeguard it. Her thoughts turned immediately to Evelyn Starhart, the young girl whose soul had been ignited by visions of the sigil, whose destiny had already begun to unfurl under the tutelage of Master Calum. Leora recalled the brief, almost fateful meeting she had encountered on the fringes of society, where whispers of a luminous child prodigy had stirred long-dormant hopes among the old custodians of the cosmic legacy. There was also Master Calum himself, the venerable guardian of the sacred mark, whose eyes reflected the weight of countless aeons, and whose teachings had shaped the very essence of true magic. Though his demeanor was gentle, there was an undeniable force in his unwavering commitment to preserving the ancient covenant. Leora's heart, hardened by isolation yet softened by the yearning for restoration, understood that if the dark ambitions prophesied in the ancient texts were to be thwarted, there would have to be a unification of the gifted, a consolidation of minds and souls bound by the luminous threads of the Empyreal Sigil. With resolve stiffened by ancient omens and the urgent pulse of prophecy, Leora gathered the manuscripts and carefully concealed them within a worn leather satchel. She left the library through a narrow, crumbling archway that opened into a moonlit corridor lined with eroded murals of celestial beings. Each step she took carried the weight of the cosmos, her inner voice echoing with the refrains of the old verses. Outside, the night was deep and boundless, the stars blinking in silent constellations above, as if affirming the timeless truths inscribed in the manuscripts she now guarded. As she traversed back through deserted streets and past the silent remnants of civilizations that had once embraced celestial magic, Leora's mind churned with conflicting emotions. There was an undeniable urgency in her quest, a pressing need to share the revelations with those who might stand as a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. At the same time, a quiet anxiety gnawed at the edges of her resolve, for the deeper she delved into the forgotten prophecies, the more she sensed that the shadow looming over the realm was vast and multifaceted, its origins lost in the mists of time, yet ever present in the heartbeat of the cosmos. In the soft glow of a solitary lantern along a deserted lane, Leora paused to consult her notes. Her fingers, ink-stained and trembling with the weight of revelation, traced the delicate script on a fragment of ancient parchment. The lines spoke of a falling star's tear, and of the night when the void shall call its own. These cryptic phrases, seemingly simple and yet laden with infinite complexity, confirmed her growing belief that a great upheaval was imminent, a clash not of mere mortals, but of cosmic proportions where the true nature of magic would be tested, and the fate of the Empyreal sigil would hang in the balance. There, beneath the silent witness of the night sky and the soft murmur of distant winds, Leora resolved to seek out the two keepers of the sacred legacy. With determined strides, she left behind the shelter of forgotten archives and the comforting confinement of ancient stone, setting her course toward the center of the land where whispers of the extraordinary child prodigy, Evelyn Starheart, and the sage master Calum intermingled with the legends of old. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, every bend in the road an unseen challenge, every shadow a potential harbinger of peril. Yet, driven by the prophecies that had awakened a dormant urgency in her soul, Leora advanced through the night, guided by the twinkling lights of distant stars and the steady cadence of her own resolute heart. The journey would take her through desolate hamlets and over rugged terrain, where ancient stone bridges spanned gaping chasms, relics of civilizations long fallen to memory. Along these solitary roads, the cosmic alignments foretold in the manuscripts began to reveal themselves in subtle omens, a comet streaking briefly across the heavens, a sudden hush of wind that carried a mournful echo, or the shimmering glow of an aurora high above the treetops. Each sign reaffirmed to Leora that the moment she was seeking was near, that the convergence of fate and choice would soon compel the guardians of cosmic magic to unite. Finally, as the first hint of dawn tinted the horizon with soft blushes of light, Leora arrived at a modest refuge nestled amid ancient groves, a place known only to a few as a sanctuary for those who studied the astral secrets. Here, nestled in the interplay of shadows and emerging light, she would rest briefly and prepare for the next leg of her pilgrimage. There was no time for prolonged respite. However, the dark omens of unchecked ambition and celestial imbalance churned in the recesses of her mind, and she knew that the union with Evelyn and Master Calum was essential to counteract the looming threat. For in the whispers of the night and the cryptic verses of old, Leora had uncovered not only a foretelling of potential catastrophe, but also the promise of hope, a hope that when nurtured by unity and guided by the eternal light of the Empyreal sigil, could restore the cosmic balance and protect the realm from the encroaching void. With the weight of destiny upon her shoulders and the luminous secrets of the past secured in her heart, she set forth into the awakening day, determined to meet her fated allies and reveal the hidden truths of a covenant older than time itself. And so Leora Moonveil moved on, her footsteps measured, her resolve unyielding, and her mind consumed with the cryptic prophecies that now charted the course for the next chapter in the saga of the Empyreal sigil. The night was colder than ever in the outer reaches of the realm, a time when even the stars appeared to shudder in silent warning. In a forgotten corner of the world, beneath a sky marred by swirling black clouds that seemed to drink in the distant starlight, a figure moved with a deliberate, ominous gait. His name would soon be whispered among those who feared the dark, that of Xandor the Void Caller. Once an honorable acolyte within the sacred order of the Sigil Bound, Xandor had long wrestled with the seductive lure of the void, the endless uncharted expanse where order melted into chaos. It was in the depths of that enigmatic dark that he found solace from the rigid constraints imposed by the ancient covenant, but solace turned to obsession, and in the end his heart was consumed by the very void he had sought to understand. In a crumbling keep far from the watchful eyes of Master Calum and the other guardians, Xandor convened with a ragged band of disaffected mages and mercenaries, drawn by the promise of unbridled power. The hall was lit only by the wavering light of guttering torches and the inexplicable gleam of shifting shadows that clung to every corner, as if alive. Here, on a floor cracked by time and stained with the memories of ancient battles, Xandor stood before his new disciples, his eyes alight with a manic brilliance. He was clad in dark, intricately patterned robes that absorbed rather than reflected light, a sartorial manifestation of the void itself. His voice, low and resonant, slithered through the gloom as he addressed his gathered followers. Fellow seekers of truth beyond the frail limits of mortal constraint, we stand at the threshold of a new epoch, he declared, every syllable dripping with a potent mixture of fervor and menace. For too long have we clung to the tired bonds of the Empyreal Sigil, that relic of divine promise meant not for dominion but for nurture. But what if I tell you that the true potential of magic lies not in its tender, ephemeral light, but in the boundless, consuming darkness of the void? That power can be ours if we dare to reclaim it, if we dare to let the void's unfathomable reach guide us to a destiny unencumbered by the vain hope of tradition. There was a moment of breathless silence as his listeners absorbed the weight of his words. In that darkened hall, some faces lit by the flickering flames bore expressions of incredulity, while others, those already embittered by the austere doctrines of the old order, harbored a dangerous glimmer of alignment with his vision. The void was an irresistible siren to those who had ever felt the sting of limitation, and Xandor was its herald. It was during these fateful gatherings that Xandor began to perform rituals of his own design, blasphemous ceremonies aimed at severing the ancient ties binding the Empyreal sigils to the divine cosmos. He delved into texts thought lost even to the most erudite scholars among the sigil-bound, extracting fragments of lore that described the raw, untempered power of the void, energies that could unmake worlds and reforge them in the image of chaos. With every incantation he uttered, his eyes burned brighter and the very air around him seemed to warp and twist, as though reality itself recoiled in response. Night after night, in secret groves and abandoned sanctuaries where the echoes of forgotten gods still murmured, Xandor and his acolytes performed rituals under a sky unburdened by the conventional order of stars. They drew arcane symbols in the soft earth with instruments edged in obsidian, their crude marks soon superimposing upon ancient sigils worn smooth by time. In those moments, the boundary between the tangible and the ephemeral dissolved. The void leaked into the world in glimmers of darkness that pulsed with an unsettling vitality. In one such ritual, held at the stroke of midnight on the eve of a rare celestial eclipse, Xandor stood at the center of a circle of fervent, fanatical followers. Above him, dark omens writhed in the heavens as the eclipse began its somber dance, a moment when the cosmos itself seemed to yield to the allure of the void. Candles were extinguished as if by a silent command, leaving the group bathed in an inky darkness punctured only by the eerie glow of uncanny symbols inscribed in chalk upon the stone floor. In that profound silence, Xandor raised his hands and chanted in a tongue that twisted through the air like serpentine shadows. His voice was a hypnotic lament, drawing forth energies that coalesced into smoky tendrils snaking through the darkness. One by one, his acolytes fell into a reverie, a state of mind where the boundaries of self dissolved into the unending darkness of the void. In these trance-like moments, their faces became as pale and hollow as if carved from the very essence of emptiness, their eyes reflecting the endless, starless abyss. It was said that those who emerged from the ritual were forever changed. No longer could they see the world through the simple lens of mortal hope. Instead, they saw it as a shifting tapestry of potential and peril, a canvas upon which the raw will of the void could imprint itself unchallenged. As the rituals continued, rumors of this cult began to stir among the common folk and even among some of the more disenchanted members of the sigil-bound. Small hamlets and outlying settlements reported strange occurrences, bursts of dark energy in remote fields, inexplicable shadows that moved against the natural order, and an almost palpable sense of dread that settled over communities like a heavy fog. These manifestations of void magic were erratic and dangerous, unpredictable surges that could leave crops withered, homes in ruin, and once trusted protectors stricken with an inexplicable malaise. Yet for many who had grown tired of the old ways, these ominous signs were a harbinger of liberation, an end to the half measures of conventional magic that had long choked the true potential of their world. Meanwhile, in the heart of the established order, Master Calum and his loyal sigil-bound began to sense the rising dissonance. Reports of unnatural occurrences and the emergence of a cult venerating the void reached the high sanctum. Calum's brow furrowed with concern as he meticulously reviewed ancient prophecies and consulted with the elder mystics. Though his heart ached at the sight of his once cherished order splintering under the weight of radical ambition, he resolved to stem the tide of corruption. Time was short, and the delicate equilibrium maintained by the Empyreal sigils was at risk of being irreparably shattered by the relentless assault of void-born chaos. Back in the shadowed halls of his unholy keep, Xandor sensed the stirrings of opposition. While his cult grew in power and its doctrines spread like wildfire through forsaken neighborhoods, whispers of dissent and betrayal began to surface within his own ranks. Some acolytes, originally drawn to the promise of unshackled power, became disillusioned when the manifestations of void magic turned out to be as destructive as they were awe-inspiring. Bitter arguments erupted in the candle-lit chambers, and clandestine defections signaled that not all who walked in his shadow desired to see the old order burn to ash. Yet, Xandor was resolute. Every setback, every betrayal, only honed his fierce determination. He embraced the very chaos he sought to unleash. His mind becoming a labyrinth of ambition and twisted wisdom, he embarked on quests to acquire forbidden relics, a shattered mirror that reputedly reflected the soul of the void, ancient runestones that pulsed with malignant energy, and grimoires penned by those who had gazed too deeply into the abyss. Each artifact further empowered him, transforming his rhetoric from that of mere discontent to a manifesto of transformation, a belief that the void, untamed and unyielding, was the inevitable evolution of magic itself. In a moment fraught with portent, during a stormy winter's night, when the wind howled as if in despair, and the skies roiled with dark, swirling clouds, Xandor led his most devout followers on an expedition into a long-forgotten necropolis. Buried beneath layers of ice and snow, the necropolis was said to be the final resting place of a sovereign whose heart had once been consumed by the boundless void, a king who had dared to seize its power and paid with the ruination of his soul. Xandor believed that within these hallowed ruins lay ancient secrets, relics of a time when the void and the divine had danced in unison. Guided by fevered visions and driven by an unquenchable thirst for power, he pressed onward into the frozen labyrinth. The necropolis was a realm of desolation, a frozen expanse where time seemed to stand still, and the only sounds were the crunch of frost underfoot and the distant mournful wail of wind that carried echoes of sorrow. As Xandor and his acolytes advanced, they encountered crumbling tombs and mausoleums shrouded in layers of ice, their ornate carvings rendered ghostly under the pallor of the moonlight. In one secluded crypt, Xandor discovered a sarcophagus adorned with cryptic symbols, the mark of a long-dead sovereign, whose lineage was rumored to have been blessed and damned by the void. With ritual precision, Xandor and his cultists performed an unholy rite upon the sarcophagus. Their chants mingled with the cold air, rising in a haunting, discordant melody that seemed to awaken the ancient powers sealed within. For several agonizing hours, the necropolis bore witness to the clash of fervent ambition and the mournful lamentations of the long-departed. The ground trembled with the stirring of spectral forces, as the sealed relics of void magic pulsed with an eerie luminescence. Xandor, standing before the open sarcophagus, felt a tremor of triumph and a glimmer of foreboding fuse within him. The relic within, an obsidian amulet encrusted with eerie, phosphorescent crystals, emitted a deep pulsing glow that resonated with the dark energies of the void. His hand reached out, trembling with both anticipation and an inner chill, and as his fingers wrapped around the relic, a powerful shock surged through him. For a split second, the icy veil of death that clung to the necropolis seemed to part, revealing visions of desolation and rebirth woven together in a tapestry of unimaginable power. This moment marked a turning point. The relic, now fused to Xandor's essence, amplified his command over the void to an unprecedented degree. As he emerged from the necropolis, cloaked in the bitter cold and bearing the weight of his newfound power, his eyes gleamed with an intensity that unsettled even his most loyal acolytes. Word of his daring and his dark conquest spread like wildfire through the underbelly of the realm, and soon the cult of the Void Caller began to evolve into something far more ominous, a movement that not only rejected the sacred balance of the Empyreal sigils, but actively sought to dismantle it through ruthless, chaotic rituals. Back in the civilized centers of magic, murmurs of disquiet grew into defiant protests. Sigil-bound mages and cosmic scholars convened in sacred assemblies to debate the growing influence of void magic. Master Calum, his heart heavy with the burden of preserving ancient balance, implored his disciples to remain steadfast in defense of the celestial covenant. In hushed conclaves in marble halls and ancient observatories, they planned countermeasures to stymie the spread of Xandor's nihilistic doctrine. Yet even as strategies formed and allies were sought, the insidious tendrils of the void crept ever farther into the fabric of the realm. Meanwhile, within the secretive circles of the void caller, fervor reached fever pitch. Xandor's most fanatical supporters began to orchestrate daring acts of subversion, striking at merchant caravans, known to harbor relics of ancient power, sabotaging towers of starlight, where cosmic scholars gathered, and inciting unrest in remote villages by unleashing controlled bursts of violent void energy. Each act, executed with a chilling precision, stoked the flames of chaos and eroded the long-held respect for the sacred Empyreal sigils. The cult evolved from a fringe sect into a formidable insurgency, its reach extending into every darkened corner, where hope had already begun to wane. Rival factions within the cult also began to jockey for power. Quiet whispers of dissent surfaced. Some questioned whether the path of pure chaos that Xandor pursued was truly the key to liberation, or merely a descent into eternal oblivion. Yet those voices were drowned by the roar of zealotry, and Xandor's ruthless ambition silenced any opposition with brutal efficiency. In clandestine meetings held in dimly lit basements, conspirators who dared disagree with his vision were swiftly and mercilessly dealt with, their fates becoming grim parables for the rest of the cult members. As the influence of the void caller spread, the landscape itself seemed to shift in response. Once fertile fields turned barren, as if the very earth recoiled from the corrosive touch of the void. Rivers ran dark and sluggish, reflecting the muted luminescence of a sky perpetually shrouded by swirling oppressive clouds. The natural rhythms of the realm were upended, where the cycles of day and night had once offered hope and renewal. Now lay only the persistent murmur of a void that threatened to swallow all light. Amid this escalating darkness, a series of confrontations began to punctuate the land. Isolated communities found themselves besieged by void-wreathed marauders, followers of Xandor, who relished the chaos and carnage they inflicted. In one such village, trembling under the onslaught of unholy fires and the insidious whispers of the cult's creed, a brave band of local mages attempted to mount a defense. They formed a fragile bulwark of conventional magic, desperately trying to preserve what little balance remained. But as the assault intensified, their spells faltered under the weight of void energies that seeped relentlessly through every crack and crevice. The resulting clash was catastrophic, a maelstrom of fury that left the villagers bereft and the once proud township reduced to smoldering ruins. As word of these atrocities reached the established order of the Sigil-bound, anger and sorrow mingled in equal measure. Master Calum and his inner circle convened by urgent council, their faces grim as they contemplated the path forward. They debated the merits of diplomacy versus confrontation, of seeking to reclaim lost adherents through understanding rather than force. Yet even as they deliberated, the dark tide of the void caller continued its inexorable advance, an unstoppable force fueled by a vision of a cosmos unbound by order, a cosmos where every atom of existence would eventually dissolve into the ever-hungry void. In this maelstrom of despair and defiance, Xandor's influence became not only a weapon of destruction but a symbol, a brand of nihilistic freedom that promised liberation from the shackles of cosmic law. He traveled across the scarred landscape, his presence marked by a trail of devastation and chaos, his every appearance accompanied by the silent fall of hope. His voice, carried on the bitter winds, echoed in the minds of those who had lost faith in the old ways. Embrace the void, he urged, for it is the only truth in a universe built on transient lies. Let the old bonds crumble and rise anew from the ashes of false order. The dark allure of his message resonated particularly among those marginalized by the stringent traditions of the Sigil-bound. Disillusioned mages, renegade alchemists, and even common folk weary of the burdens imposed by celestial expectations found in his doctrine a promise of radical liberation. For many, the void was not a harbinger of doom, but a gateway to uncharted realms of possibility, a realm where power was not tempered by duty or sacrifice, but bestowed freely upon those willing to cast aside the constraints of morality. Yet behind this seductive promise lurked an insidious truth. The void did not offer peace, it demanded a toll, a sacrifice of the very essence that defined mortal life. As Xandor's campaign of terror and chaos spread, the tension between the established defenders of the cosmic order and the insurgent cult of the Void Caller reached a feverish pitch. In the nights that followed brutal skirmishes and whispered conspiracies, the realm itself seemed to hold its breath, poised on the edge of an abyss. Those who still clung to the ancient covenant looked upward with desperate hope, while others, seduced by the promise of unfettered power, awaited the coming storm with a mixture of dread and dark anticipation. Throughout this turbulent epoch, the Void's insidious influence seeped ever deeper into the hearts and minds of the people. The once unified legacy of the Empyreal Sigils, which had long been a symbol of balance and cosmic wonder, now splintered into a tapestry of conflicting ideologies, each vying for dominance in a chaotic struggle for supremacy. In the shadow of this growing discord, Xandor the Voidcaller emerged as the uncontested voice of a radical new order, his dark charisma and ruthless determination transforming him into both a savior for some and a harbinger of oblivion for others. And so, as the realm writhed under the crushing weight of a force that sought to unmake the boundaries of creation itself, the stage was set for a conflict that would define the fate of magic. In every ruined hamlet, every scarred landscape, and every heart tainted by darkness, the specter of the void loomed large, a reminder that sometimes the true battle is not merely one of light versus dark, but of the choice to cling to order or to surrender to a chaos that knows no bounds. At the climax of these shadowed days, as the cult's dark rituals reached an unprecedented crescendo, and the land trembled beneath the strain of a power unhinged, the tendrils of void magic began to weave their sinister influence far beyond the hidden enclaves of Xandor's followers. And though the voices of the established guardians still rang out in defiant protest, the omnipresent whisper of the void promised only one immutable truth, that in a universe ruled by cosmic impermanence, nothing remains untouched by darkness. The Shadow Ascendant continued its relentless advance, a sprawling saga of ambition, despair and unspeakable power, leaving the realm teetering on the brink of irreversible transformation, with the dark heart of the void pulsing at its core. Beneath a sky alive with tumultuous clouds and shimmering constellations that had witnessed the dawn of cosmic eras, Master Calum assembled a council in the ancient halls of an ivy-clad citadel perched on a windswept plateau. The fortress, built long ago in honor of the Empyreal Sigils, now served as a beacon of hope and defiance, a sanctuary where the surviving remnants of the Sigil-bound could gather unimpeded by the encroaching darkness. As twilight bled into the restless night, Calum's voice, resonant with the authority of countless generations, summoned emissaries from every forgotten corner of the realm, rural sorcerers whose magic was as wild and pure as the land itself, urban mages steeped in the traditions of astral study, and reclusive custodians of arcane knowledge, whose hearts beat in time with the silent rhythms of the cosmos. Within the great hall of the citadel, its vaulted ceiling adorned with intricately carved sigils and celestial motifs now dulled by age, figures gathered in cautious anticipation. The air was charged with latent power as each delegate arrived, bearing the varied insignias of their diverse orders, a mosaic of history, lore and magic united by a common purpose. There was Roran, a grizzled druid from the wild heart of the hinterlands, Celine's distant cousin Arion, whose penchant for deciphering forgotten runes had long elevated him to a revered status among the scholars, and Esmara, a fierce enchantress whose command over starlight lent her an otherworldly grace, their eyes each reflecting their own struggles and dreams, fixed upon Master Calum as he took his place at the head of a long polished table that was scarred with the weight of the past. Friends, protectors, and seekers of truth, Calum intoned, his voice carrying the gravity of ancient prophecies and the hope of a resurgence. We stand at a precipice. The sanctity of our covenant with the Empyreal Sigil is under siege. The corruption wrought by Xandor and his cult of the Void Caller threatens to unravel all that our forebears held sacred. Today we must cast aside old grudges and mend the fractured bonds that once united us. Our strength has always lain not solely in the magic we wield, but in the unity of our diverse spirits. It is time to converge as guardians and reforge the ancient ties that once bound us to the cosmos. A hush fell over the assembly as Calem's words settled deep into their hearts. The druid Roran stepped forward, his weathered face a map of reverence and hardship. "The land itself weeps for the loss of balance," he said, his voice gravelly yet filled with earnest emotion. "Every tree, every stream, every creature feels the rupture. We too must heal this rift. I offer the wild, unyielding magic of nature to strengthen our union." His words sparked murmurs of agreement, and one by one, each representative voiced their commitment to stand firm against the encroaching void. As the hours wore on within that dimly lit great hall, the council delved deep into strategy and lore. As Mara unfurled ancient scrolls and detailed accounts of the original celestial communion, rituals that had once united the Sigil bound with the pure, unadulterated energy of the cosmos, her delicate fingers traced the faded glyphs, each stroke a testament to the beauty of a time when magic was a living bridge between mortal hearts and the divine essence of the Empyreal sigils. Meanwhile, Arion contributed his scholarly knowledge, decoding archaic texts that hinted at lost techniques for binding magic in its most potent and uncorrupted form. In a voice tempered with wisdom and passion, he expounded upon the principle that magic in its truest state was inherently ephemeral, a spark destined to burn brightly and then fade, only to be reborn anew. The key, he asserted, is not to cling to power as a permanent state, but to embrace its fleeting beauty, to learn from its impermanence and use that transience as a means to heal rather than to dominate. Throughout the council's lengthy deliberations, the air itself seemed to pulse with the resonances of distant cosmic melodies, ethereal harmonies that reminded each delegate of the age-old promise made between the celestial and the mortal. Outside, the tempestuous night continued to rage, mirrors to the internal storm of emotions and memories that each guardian carried within them. Calem, ever the pillar of steadfast resolve, shared his recollections of the early days of the Sigil bound, a time when brotherhood and unity had been the bedrock of their existence. He recounted tales of battles fought not only against external foes but against the creeping corruption that had slowly begun to erode the very principles that had once been the Order's lifeblood. His voice grew hoarse with the weight of these memories as he recounted sacrifices made and destinies intertwined, each story a reminder of what was at stake. As the assembly pressed on into the early hours of dawn, the discussion shifted from strategy to action. The urgency of their mission became palpable. They resolved to chart a path through the realm that would allow them to rally scattered defenders and reawaken the latent strength of the Empyreal sigils before Jandor's void magic could engulf the realm completely. To this end, Calem proposed the formation of specialized units, small mobile contingents that would venture into afflicted regions, seek out communities still loyal to the ancient ways, and reclaim relics of lost power that had been usurped by the cultists. Roran's unit, for example, would focus on the wilds, tracking disturbances in the natural order and reclaiming the untamed, raw magic that still pulsed beneath the soil and in the wind. As Mara's contingent, composed of urban mages and enchanted guardians, would work to fortify ancient sanctuaries, restoring faded inscriptions and reactivating dormant conduits of celestial energy. Meanwhile, Arion's scholarly detachment would send emissaries to distant libraries and observatories, gathering forgotten lore and piecing together the remaining fragments of the original rites. Plans were laid out with meticulous care, a network of signals, secret meeting places and enchanted conduits that would link the diverse factions of the Sigil bound across disparate terrains. Every detail was discussed, the specific incantations that could reawaken latent magic hidden within ancient ruins, the delicate balance required to channel void energies without succumbing to their corruptive lure, and the diplomatic measures necessary to persuade reluctant allies that unity was their strongest weapon. The assembly underscored the importance of maintaining a clear separation between the ephemeral magic of their order and the dark, unyielding abyss that Xandor represented. In quiet, determined whispers, the Guardians vowed never to let the seductive promises of the void corrupt the purity of the Empyreal sigil. Outside the citadel, as the first light of dawn broke over a scarred but resilient landscape, these plans began to be set in motion. Calem dispatched his most trusted envoys, each a beacon of the old magic, their eyes alight with the promise of restoration to reach out to hidden enclaves where sympathetic hearts still beat for the old ways. In remote mountain hamlets, shadowed forest clearings, and crumbling urban ruins, these envoys carried with them tokens of ancient power, charmed talismans that glowed with an inner light, scrolls inscribed with sacred incantations, and relics of divine origin that had been passed down from one generation of Sigil-bound to the next. Their mission was clear: to awaken dormant loyalties, to remind the scattered defenders that their heritage was still alive, and that the threat of the void was not insurmountable if the Guardians stood united. As news of this convergence spread like wildfire, resistance coalesced in unexpected ways. In a secluded valley where the trees whispered secrets in an ancient tongue, a group of rural sorcerers, long isolated from the sterile, rigid doctrines of urban mages, gathered around a flickering bonfire. Their leader, a wiry woman named Talia, whose hands were calloused by years of communing with the primal energies of the earth, recounted omens and portents that had recently been etched into the landscape: a sudden bloom of phosphorescent moss on weathered stone, the inexplicable migration of nocturnal creatures, and the eerie alignment of the heavens with relics of the forgotten. Her words stirred both awe and determination among her people, and she vowed to join the united cause, offering the untamed magic of nature as their spearhead against the void's relentless encroachment. In the heart of an ancient metropolis, whose marble statues and shimmering canals had long borne witness to the splendor of lost civilizations, an enclave of high mages had convened in a clandestine tower. Their leader, a somber figure known as Marcellus, whose eyes carried the weight of academic rigor and the bitter sting of disillusionment, recounted the intellectual debates that had raged within their hallowed halls regarding the evolving nature of the Empyreal Sigil. For them, the struggle was as much one of erudition as it was of martial might, a contest to preserve the sanctity of knowledge amidst a tide of sacrilegious fervor. Marcellus argued that while the void offered untamed power, it also threatened to erase the delicate interplay between science and magic that had once defined their golden age. With measured resolve, he pledged that the scholars of old would lend their wisdom to the cause, ensuring that the new alliance would be one of both strength and reason. As the diverse factions began to converge, logistics presented their own labyrinthine challenges. The envoys, who crossed rugged mountain passes and navigated labyrinths of subterranean tunnels, coordinated clandestine meetings beneath starry skies where magic and hope intertwined. They carried with them encrypted messages inscribed in luminous ink that only the initiated could decipher, a secret language forged from the very dialects of the cosmos. Each meeting was a tapestry of emotions: the exhilaration of rediscovery, the solemn recognition of past failures, and the quiet, unyielding determination that came from a shared belief in the ancient covenant. These rendezvous were not without peril. Rival factions and lingering loyalists to the old rigid order of the Sigil-bound sometimes regarded such overtures with deep suspicion and fear, as if the emergence of a unified front might herald the end of their cherished if imperfect traditions. Yet, as the envoys spread their messages, the call to unity overcame old divisions, and gradually, disparate voices found a common rhythm, the rhythm of a future reclaimed by those who had not forgotten the luminous promise of the Empyreal Sigil. Within the walls of the citadel, under Master Kellam's patient guidance, the converging factions began a series of joint training sessions and ritualistic communes. In expansive courtyards bordered by ancient stone reliefs of celestial battles, men and women from all walks of life, farmers turned elemental sorcerers, battle-scarred knights with hearts still aflame with purpose, and erudite mages whose words carried the resonance of centuries, trained side by side. They exchanged techniques and incantations, melding the primal power of nature with refined urban magic, forging hybrid forms of spellcraft that resonated with both the raw force of creation and the tempered wisdom of the ages. The air itself in these gatherings was alive with a tangible synergy. Sparks of light and particles of mana danced upward in intricate patterns, forming ephemeral constellations that bore witness to the union of disparate magics. These convocation sessions were as much a renaissance as they were a war council. Over the course of many grueling days and nights, unified by a common enemy and a desire to reclaim the purity of the Empyreal Sigil, the Guardians honed their skills to unprecedented levels. Master Kellum orchestrated ceremonies that rekindled memories of ancient rites, the celestial communion rituals that had once united Sigil-bound hearts in a single brilliant chorus. Under his tutelage, the fledgling alliances learned not just to wield magic, but to understand its deeper essence, that every spell cast was a verse in the timeless poem of the cosmos, every incantation a call for harmony in the face of chaos. One such training session unfolded beneath an open sky on a plateau rimmed with luminous crystals that refracted the early light of dawn. Here Kellum demonstrated an archaic invocation, a song of creation that resonated with the heartbeat of the earth itself. As his voice soared in measured cadences, the assembled guardians felt an indescribable thrill that transcended mere mortal sensation. The air shimmered as if alive with the collective pulse of ancient starlight, and for an ephemeral moment, every participant in the gathering was united in a singular purpose, a moment of pure, unadulterated communion with the cosmic will. The power that surged from that rite was not the raw, unchanneled force of the void or the unchecked brilliance of unrefined magic, but a balanced, harmonious energy that promised hope in the midst of impending darkness. Yet the path to unity was fraught with interpersonal strife and cultural divides. Old rivalries and entrenched hierarchies surfaced in heated debates about the correct interpretation of ancient prophecies and the proper way to harness the diffuse energies of the Empyreal Sigil. Some veteran warriors whose lives had been forged in the crucible of past conflicts were skeptical of the new hybrid forms of magic that were emerging, fearing that they might dilute the purity of the sacred rites. Others, tempered by grief and longing for change, embraced the evolving expressions of power with fervor, seeing in them the promise of a more inclusive, dynamic future. Master Kellum, with a calm wisdom acquired over centuries, mediated these disputes with measured patience. He recalled venerable lessons from a time when diversity of thought had been celebrated as the very source of strength, and he encouraged his disciples to view the convergence not as a threat to tradition, but as an evolution of it. In the midst of these interactions, covert emissaries from Master Kellum's inner circle monitored the spread of the Void Caller's influence. Utilizing enchanted mirrors and astral communication crystals, they tracked disturbances in the natural mana flows, anomalies that were characteristic of the dark void magic. Every unusual flicker of light or ripple in the cosmic weave was scrutinized meticulously. These subtle signs, often imperceptible to the untrained eye, provided vital intelligence about the movements of Xandor's cult. The Guardians learned that his influence, though initially confined to isolated pockets, was gradually seeping into the farthest reaches of the realm, contaminating the very essence of what had once been a pristine magical order. With grim determination, they resolved that the convergence of their forces was not only an act of restoration, but a preemptive strike, an opportunity to erect barriers of pure, uncorrupted magic that could shield their collective heritage from the corrosive tide of the void. As the days merged into nights and back into days again, the alliance deepened. Joint field exercises saw mixed contingents venturing out to reclaim lost relics from defiled sanctuaries. In one daring expedition, a mixed team of rural sorcerers and urban mages infiltrated an abandoned temple on the outskirts of a marshland. The temple had been overtaken by the tendrils of void energy, its once sacred glyphs now twisted into grotesque parodies of celestial light. Through a combination of elemental fire and precise incantations, the team managed to purify the temple's defiled altars, restoring a fraction of the ancient power that had been lost to corruption. Such victories, though hard-won and fleeting, served as beacons of encouragement, reinforcing the belief that unity was the only antidote to the pervasive darkness. The strain of constant vigilance and the relentless demands of their mission began to take its toll on the Guardians, yet it also fostered bonds deeper than any ordinary camaraderie. In quiet moments after strenuous training or amidst the meticulous work of deciphering ancient manuscripts, conversations turned from strategy to personal stories. Many recalled the tragic losses and bitter betrayals that had scarred their past. Others spoke of the humble beginnings from which they had emerged, a testament to their unwavering resilience. In these exchanges, the disparate voices of the Guardians melded into a unified narrative of hope, a narrative in which every hardship was acknowledged, and every victory, no matter how small, was celebrated as a step toward the restoration of balance. Master Calum, ever the quiet sentinel of truth and continuity, remained at the center of these gatherings, a living link to the bygone age of the Sigil-bound. His eyes, always reflecting a calm inner light, also revealed the deep sorrows of a time when the Guardians had faltered, and the Empyreal sigils had nearly faded into oblivion. Yet his steadfast nature and unyielding belief in the resilience of the human and magical spirit provided the rallying point for all who had gathered there. With unwavering clarity, he articulated his vision for the future, not simply to thwart the dark ambitions of Xandor the Voidcaller, but to restore the very ethos of magic, a magic that was as much about healing and unity as it was about strength and awe. In the corridors of that ancient citadel, echoing with the soulful laments of long-ago battles and the hopeful strains of new hymns, a comprehensive plan took shape. The alliance would be divided into specialized groups, each tasked with a crucial aspect of the coming conflict. One group, led by Roran and the rural sorcerers, would journey deep into the wild lands to awaken and secure the natural reserves of elemental magic. A second group, commanded by Esmera and the urban mages, would focus on reclaiming defiled sanctuaries within collapsing metropolises and restoring them as bastions of pure Empyreal energy. A third scholarly contingent, headed by Arion and Marcellus, would travel to the great libraries and observatories, collecting ancient wisdom and deciphering esoteric texts to provide a theoretical bulwark against the corrupting influence of void magic. As every detail was meticulously planned, the Guardians understood that time was of the essence. The dark ambitions of Xandor were not static. They were growing, evolving, and reaching further into the fabric of the realm with every passing day. The sensors of enchanted crystals and astral mirrors had already detected minor breaches in areas previously thought secure. The Guardians resolved that these preliminary assaults would be met with swift and decisive action, a strategic preemptive strike to seal off the encroaching void energies before they could fully take root. In the closing hours of the Council's gathering, as the first rays of a new day filtered through the high, narrow windows of the Citadel's Great Hall, Master Calum cast one final, lingering gaze across the assembly. There was no theatrical flourish in his words, only a quiet, solemn understanding that the path they had chosen was one of both immense challenge and transcendent possibility. Yet at that very moment, no final conclusion was uttered. The convergence of Guardians was only just beginning, a sprawling, ongoing tapestry of unity, resolve, and the ever-pressing need to counter the shadow that sought to unravel the very heart of magic. And so, with heavy hearts and determined spirits, the newly united Sigil-bound prepared to set forth on the arduous journey ahead, carrying with them the ancient promises of renewal and the indomitable hope that through their collective strength, the sacred covenant of the Empyreal Sigil might yet shine in all its transcendent glory. Beneath a sky roiling with turbulent celestial fire, and amidst the shattered remains of ancient sanctuaries, the moment had finally come. The unified Sigil-bound, led by Master Calum and now bolstered by the combined forces of rural sorcerers, urban mages, and wise scholars, assembled upon a vast natural amphitheater carved deep in the bones of an ancient mountain range. On a plateau overlooking a land scarred by void incursions and hastily repurposed relics of the Empyreal Sigil, the final battle would be waged, a contest in which every shred of hope, every ounce of luminous magic, in every desperate prayer for cosmic balance would be thrown against the rising tide of nihilism. The dark horizon was a chaotic canvas of swirling void energies and shimmering remnants of ancient starlight. At its very edge, the forces of the Voidcaller gathered, their numbers swelling in a storm of fanatical zeal. Xandor, his eyes burning with the cold light of the abyss, and his countenance set in a mask of determined madness, stood at the forefront of his dark host. Clad in obsidian robes that seemed to drink in every glimmer of hope, he raised his arms in a contemptuous salute to the void, a gesture that sent ripples of malignant energy through the encroaching darkness. Across the battlefield, the Guardians stood united in defiant posture. Master Calum, regal even in his battle-worn form, surveyed the enemy with eyes that had witnessed eons, his voice rich with the resonance of ancient incantations, and tempered by the wisdom of countless generations, broke the oppressive silence. Today we stand as the heirs of a sacred covenant, a bond that binds mortal hearts to the eternal light of the cosmos. Stand fast, for the Empyreal Sigil, and all the hope it carries, shall not be snuffed out by the dark allure of the void. A murmur of determination rippled through the ranks. From the diverse assembly emerged figures of every hue: rural sorcerers with eyes like embers of the primordial earth, urban mages adorned in robes embroidered with celestial maps, and learned scholars clutching ancient tomes that chronicled the harmonious marriage between magic and the divine. Among them, Evelyn Starheart, once an unassuming village orphan awakened to the luminous call of the cosmos, now shone with a radiance that belied her tender years. Master Calem's steady gaze fell upon her, silently affirming that the destiny of the Sigil-bound had found its rightful champion. The stage for the final confrontation was set upon a vast plain punctuated by the ruins of forgotten altars, broken stone monoliths once dedicated to the Empyreal sigils. Here, the earth itself pulsed with residual magical energy, a silent testament to the ancient rites performed on these hallowed grounds. It was in this charged arena that the two forces would clash, a collision of order and chaos, light and void. As the first light of a blood-red dawn bled into the heavens, a low, resonant hum filled the air. The ground trembled as if in anticipation, and the very ether vibrated with the promise of impending cataclysm. With a guttural cry, Xandor signaled his assault. From the darkness, his void-bound cultists surged forward like a tidal wave of despair, their forms wreathed in shifting shadows and crackling with energy stolen from the void, moved with a predatory swiftness that defied mortal expectation. They hurled spells of corrosive darkness, each incantation a virulent strain of void magic designed to fracture the ancient bond between the Empyreal sigils and their mortal wielders. The Guardians answered with a unified outcry of defiance. Lady Eleanor, whose mastery of ember magic had already rekindled hope in earlier battles, stepped to the vanguard. Her gestures were precise, her incantations a harmonious blend of protection and fierce retribution. Fiery arcs burst forth from her outstretched hands, each bolt a shimmering testament to the purity of true cosmic power. The flames she conjured burned with a brilliant radiance, purging the darkness with every searing burst. At the same time, Brother Bastian, the stoic keeper of forgotten lore, rallied his inner strength, his voice rising in a solemn litany drawn from ancient manuscripts. His prayers carved out ripples of protective force across the battlefield, ensnaring waves of void energy in carefully woven barriers of sacred light. The clash was cataclysmic. Metal met shadow, incantation clashed with the void's fury, and the entire expanse shuddered as opposing forces collided with the ferocity of exploding stars. Ribbons of cosmic light and dark, twisted and vibrant, danced across the sky in a chaotic ballet, each strand a narrative of hope or of despair. In one heart-stopping moment near a crumbling altar, Evelyn Starheart found herself face to face with a void-bound sentinel, whose eyes were voids of endless night. Their duel was swift and graceful, a study in contrasts, as her luminous measured strikes carved arcs of pure energy, while her opponent's dark ripostes sought to consume that light. Their battle, though brief, encapsulated the eternal struggle between the ephemeral brilliance of creation and the relentless devouring hunger of the void. Beyond the immediate skirmishes, the battlefield itself became an arena of cosmic interplay. The very skies above shifted in a spectacle of celestial phenomena, the stars wheeling in slow predestined arcs, nebulas flaring, as if ignited by the fervor of the conflict, and the horizon, painted in hues of crimson and indigo, glowed with the tumultuous promise of both creation and destruction. Master Calem, standing high upon a ridge overlooking the fray, closed his eyes and drew upon the deep well of his ancient power. He reached out with the full measure of his being, seeking to channel a surge of restorative magic that would mend the fractured bonds of the Covenant, while simultaneously bolstering the Guardian's strength against the encroaching void. As the battle raged through the day, with minutes stretching into an eternity of clashing magics and the cries of warriors echoing across the scarred plain, Xandor himself emerged from behind the front lines. His presence was heralded by a sudden and overwhelming chill, a wave of frigidity that snuffed out nearby embers and sent tremors of unease through the ranks of the defenders. With eyes that seemed to hold the cold light of distant dead stars, He strode forward, his every movement exuding a terrifying blend of confidence and malevolence. Clad in garments that shifted like a living void, he met Master Kalem's gaze with a sneer of contempt and a wordless challenge. For a moment, time itself appeared to pause as the two ancient forces, one embodying the steadfast light of the cosmos, and the other the inexorable pull of the void, stood as opposites on the precipice of cosmic chaos. In that heartbeat of suspension, the assembled guardians could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon them, a collective burden that demanded sacrifice, unity, and an unwavering commitment to the ancient covenant. Then the inevitable struck with a roar that seemed to summon the very fury of collapsing galaxies. Xandor unleashed a torrent of void energy. It cascaded forward like a dark, churning river, swallowing everything in its path with a ravenous hunger that threatened to erase the very heavens. Master Kalem countered with a bellow of his own, a clarion call that reverberated through the ether and summoned from the ancient vaults of his soul a blast of pure luminous energy. The two forces met in the center of the battlefield in a titanic explosion, a conflagration of light and shadow that rocked the realm to its core. The impact was seismic. The ground split in fissures that ran like scars across the plain, and the very air vibrated with the resonance of clashing destinies. As the cosmic duel intensified, the other guardians surged into action. Lady Eleanor, her spirit ignited by righteous fury, channeled all her mastery over ember magic into a sustained onslaught against the dark tide. Her incantations flared like phoenix wings, each burst a promise that the light of the Empyreal Sigil would not falter. Brother Bastion and the scholarly contingent began to weave intricate spells designed not just for offense, but to fortify the energy channels that sustained the ancient covenant. They invoked long-forgotten rites, their voices merging in a choir of determination and sorrow, forging bonds of arcane might that radiated from the earth like shimmering columns of hope. In the midst of this epic struggle, small moments of valor shone like beacons. A rural sorcerer, whose hands had once coaxed wild magic from the bosom of nature, soared above the chaos on a gust of enchanted wind, scattering a swarm of void-infused adversaries with a single sweeping gesture. An urban mage, her eyes alight with the determination of someone who had witnessed too much despair to yield, deflected a barrage of dark energy by summoning a shimmering shield of crystalline light that refracted the unholy spell into harmless motes of luminescence. In every corner of the battlefield, acts of courage and desperate resilience intermingled with the raw, formless energies of the conflict. Yet the true fulcrum of fate lay with the two ancient powers now colliding at the heart of the confrontation, the transcendent flame of the Empyreal Sigil and the inexorable darkness of the void. As the duel between Master Kalem and Xandor raged on, it became clear that the outcome of this struggle would determine not only the fate of the Sigil-bound, but the entire cosmic order. Kalem's incantations, steady, profound, and resolute, were imbued with the wisdom of countless ages and the unyielding hope of civilizations long past. Each word he uttered carried the legacy of his forebears, a litany of sacrifice and unity forged in the crucible of cosmic battles. In contrast, Xandor's every syllable was a curse, a declaration of nihilistic ambition that sought to snuff out the flickering light of creation and replace it with eternal oblivion. The clashing energies reached a fevered pitch, a moment when the boundaries of the physical and the divine blurred into an almost indescribable tableau of wonder and terror. The very heavens above were rent apart by the force of their duel, as celestial bodies trembled in their orbits and distant galaxies shuddered in the infinite void. It was in that cataclysmic instant that the Guardians felt the full awe-inspiring enormity of their charge. The knowledge that the future of magic, the balance of all creation, hinged upon the choices made in this crucible of cosmic reckoning. It was then that, with a deep, resonant cry that seemed to echo across the fabric of time itself, Master Kalem made his final desperate move. Drawing upon every vestige of the ancient power that flowed through his veins, he channeled a final surge of radiant energy into the Empyreal vortex at the center of the battlefield. His voice, now a clarion call resonant with both sorrow and unbreakable hope, declared, by the sacred covenant of the Empyreal Sigil, by the light of 1,000 ancient stars, I call upon the cosmic order to restore what has been marred by darkness. Let the true flame of creation vanquish the void and renew our mortal realm. In that resounding moment, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Light and darkness danced as one, intertwining in a final cataclysmic embrace. The surge from Kalim's final incantation cascaded outward in a breathtaking arc of pure undiluted energy, a torrent of luminescence that swept across the plain like a cleansing tide. It crashed into Xandor's dark onslaught with the force of a collapsing supernova, each pulse of light a vindication of the ancient covenant and a repudiation of the nihilistic creed. For a fraction of an eternity, the energy surged and swirled in a chaotic maelstrom, a cosmic ballet of creation and destruction, hope and despair, until, with a final convulsive shudder, the vortex consumed the darkness. When the searing brilliance finally began to subside, a profound silence fell over the battlefield. The cacophony of clashing magics, the roars of defiance and conquest, and the bitter laments of the fallen were replaced by a still, suffused calm. The dark forces of the Void Caller had been driven back, their malignant influence dispersed like shadows at dawn. Xandor himself, weakened and disoriented by the overwhelming force of the Empyreal surge, fell to his knees, a broken figure whose once fiery ambition was now reduced to a smoldering ember of despair. In that final moment, the cosmic scales balanced anew, and the ancient covenant was restored by sacrifice and unity. As Master Kalim's last words echoed softly through the trembling air, words of both triumph and mourning, the assembled guardians felt a profound transformation ripple through their collective spirit. The sacred light of the Empyreal Sigil had reasserted itself, not as a tool for dominion, but as an eternal promise of renewal and hope. Lady Eleanor, Brother Bastian, Evelyn Starheart, and the countless others who had borne witness to this cosmic reckoning stood together amidst the ruins, their hearts alight with the understanding that the struggle for equilibrium was far from over, yet that the true essence of magic had been, if only for a moment, reclaimed. In the quiet aftermath, as the embers of the final incantation faded into a gentle ambient glow, the guardians began to tend to the wounded and gather the shattered relics of their sacred heritage. The once shattered plane, scarred by countless battles and marred by the taint of void magic, now slowly bathed in the soft radiance of a reborn covenant. The oppressive darkness that had loomed so ominously was replaced, however fleetingly, by the eternal ever-renewing light of the cosmos, a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the unyielding power of unity.